You can take your Bibles and go to Matthew chapter 5. Last week we started looking at the Sermon on the Mount. And we're going to continue right where we left off. We left off in verse 26, so we'll go to Matthew 5, verse 27. And most people, I think most Christians and even, a lot of people that aren't, have heard of the Sermon on the Mount, and even those that haven't heard of that title for this teaching, they've heard of precepts from it. I think you'd have to live under a rock in the most remote place on earth to not have heard some of the things that we'll end up covering in the Sermon on the Mount. And some of those are in what we're going to be getting into this evening. But for all of what people have heard, there's a lot of misunderstanding, a lack of understanding of so many of these truths, and we will endeavor to make that clearer. So Matthew chapter 5, in verse 27, and we're continuing now in this, right where we left off, with this pattern of first stating a standard that they were familiar with, and then showing a new standard, a higher plane, even greater way to live that's being introduced. And in verse 27, ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. That was part of the law, Exodus 20. But I say unto you, that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath already committed adultery with her, hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. So here he's saying, from the law that it's not right to commit adultery. But I'm telling you, somebody that looks after a woman with lust in his heart's already done that. Now, this, like the other truths that we'll be getting into, are using the figure of speech hyperbole. So it doesn't mean, if a fella's walking down the street and he sees a girl and he thinks, wow, she's really pretty, oh my gosh, I just committed adultery. I might as well go through with the deed now. I've already gone this far. So that's not what he's saying. That's not what he's saying. What he's showing is that all of this gets down to a matter of heart. And it is a matter of heart. And someone who, in their heart, not just, a passing thought, but somebody in their heart that's already gone to that place, well, they've already sort of cheated, Once that person's really lusted, and lust is extreme, okay? It's not just that passing thought. Lust is that excessive desire. And when somebody's done that, where they've really truly lusted after someone, that they want to be with that person, well, then what's the difference, I don't think any spouse would be happy knowing that their spouse really, really has that feeling about somebody else, would they? No, of course not. Verse 29. And if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. So now, most of you probably have no problem understanding that this is hyperbole at this point. You don't see a lot of people walking around with one eye, but if everybody that followed this, that believes that, so many people do believe this is literal, but either they never had their eye or hand offend them, or they're not really willing to follow it, right? Mm-hmm. But again, it is an exaggeration. It's an exaggeration, and this is more easily understood, both this and the next verse, in the Eastern customs and idioms than it is in Western, where we tend to take some of this stuff more literally when we read it, not understanding that it's not meant to be that, not understanding the figures of speech and the Orientalisms behind it. Verse 30, and if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and that not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. So here again, this is showing that you should do the literal behind the figure of speech, behind the hyperbole, is that you should go to great lengths to not have your hand or your eye offend you. That you should take this seriously, that this should be not a light thing, and that if you were, if your hand was offending you by means of you being a thief, for example, that you should do whatever you have to do, so to speak, not mutilate yourself, literally, to see to it that that hand is not offending you, that you're not acting in that manner still. And here again, I'd like to read to you from George M. Lambsa's handling of these verses. And cut off your hand. Cut off your hand is an Aramaic saying that is used in conversation but with no reference to actually cutting off one's hand. People often say to each other, cut off your hand from my vineyard, which means do not gather grapes from my vineyard. His hand is too long means he is a thief. Shorten your hand means do not steal. Again, cut your hand means cut out the bad habit. The hand is mentioned because it is the agent by which the mind and body do their work. Better enter with one hand and one foot is figurative speech which implies that the evil done by the act of hand and foot is greater than the loss of the hand and foot. The public understood these terms. The Galileans who spoke Northern Aramaic were neither puzzled by these remarks, which sound so harsh, nor did they require explanations because these terms were of current usage. They are still current in Oriental speech and are the commonplaces of Oriental thought. All right, let's continue. Verse 31. It hath been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery. And whosoever shall marry her that is divorced, commit adultery. And, again, this is talking about, it's a heart issue. It's also worth repeating again that this is the gospel times and the gospel administration. Now, I don't mean by that that it's okay to just, not mean what you say and say what you mean when you take wedding vows. That's supposed to be a commitment for life. And yet, certainly in our society especially, and that's become commonplace. Now, that doesn't mean just because it's in our society that divorce has become commonplace that should be our standard. It shouldn't be. And it's not God's heart. It's not what God intended marriage to be. And people that take marriage no more serious than a generation ago they took going steady, that's ridiculous. And that's what it's gotten down to in some cases. But on the other end of that, God is a God of mercy and grace and understanding. And there are certainly circumstances where God, you just got to know that God's heart is that he wants people the best for them. And certainly if somebody's in an abusive relationship and, other circumstances, then, God's not willful that they would remain in that for their entire life. With all of this, okay, the point is to look at God's heart, and that's what Jesus Christ is endeavoring to do in this sermon. He's endeavoring to show them the heart of God because they didn't get it. And whether it was being so hard, legalistic and hard and just cruel in the application of the law, so that rather than that law serving to bless people and provide God's goodness in their lives, it became just this, way that instead it put them in terrible bondage where, the ridiculousness of you can't heal a guy on the Sabbath day because that might be considered work in their minds. That's the one extreme, where it just was made hard. And, ironically, by the very same people, in other situations, they looked for any way they could to weasel out of things, so that God's heart got lost on the other end. And here, what he's showing them is, let's go back to what the heart was of marriage. You remember in another place, they came to him, tempting him and saying, is it lawful to put away your wife? And now you see kind of why they thought they could catch him up on that. Jesus Christ showed God's heart. He showed God's heart, and in this case, what marriage was intended to be. And that should always be, if somebody enters into marriage, it should be done with the recognition of the seriousness of the commitment they're making, and that only the most extreme situation would be cause to try to break that vow. Verse 32. Did I do that? Yes. Verse 33. Again ye have heard that it hath been said by them of old time, Thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oath. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither shalt thou swear by the head, because thou canst not make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yea, yea, nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. This is another one where, maybe not. Okay, I don't have the reference. So in the East, I read this in one of these. In the East, they would really go to great lengths, always like swearing about everything, especially like in the marketplace and business dealings. And basically, people that couldn't be trusted would try to convince how trustworthy they were by swearing on this and swearing on that and so on and so forth. And it just became a joke. And Jesus Christ is saying, just mean what you say and say what you mean. Let your yea be yea, let your nay be nay. You don't need to do all this, I swear on my mother's grave, I swear on this, I swear to God. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't have to do that. You should simply say what you mean. Your word ought to be good. There was a time, it becomes less and less, where a man's word was his bond. If a fellow said he was going to do something, he'd go to great lengths because his word meant something. In this culture, it did. And those that didn't, that's what he's reproving. Verse 38. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. That standard, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, was not only Mosaic law, and most people know it as the Code of Hammurabi, and most cultures, most civilized nations, that's what they live by. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, very literally. But I say unto you, that ye resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Smiting on the cheek, that phrase itself is an Eastern idiom. It doesn't mean what we immediately think of. It doesn't mean if somebody comes up to you and smacks you in the face, just say, oh, thanks, I needed that. Wasn't there a commercial like that? And then you turn the other cheek and they do it again. Smite on the cheek meant to insult a person. They would touch, but it would just be a little like that. And it was just a way of insulting them. And what he's saying is that if somebody insults you, rather than you retaliating to that, you instead would just, turn the other cheek. I think we understand it more easily when we compare that concept to how it's expressed in Romans, where it says, brethren, avenge not yourselves, neither give place unto evil, For vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. So if someone curses you, respond with blessing. We understand that. That's pretty simple. If a fella, is mean, if he's rude, rather than, I give what I get, and then everybody's the loser, we instead endeavor to bless that person, and then everybody's the winner. Verse 40. And if a man will sue thee at the law and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. This is one that I want to read to you, this in verse 42. And whosoever shall compel thee to go a mile, go with him twain. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn thou not away. This one from Eastern Customs and Idioms of the Bible by Bishop K.C. Pillai. Cloak and coat. In the East, a coat and cloak go together. The cloak is a long, loose outer garment. You put on a cloak, and then you put on a coat on top of it. No man goes out without a coat. They do not walk with only a cloak, they will be ashamed. The cloak is a very costly garment, and no man goes out without one. People sued or taken under suspicion will be demanded to give the coat. The coat is used as a bail bond for a criminal. If a man is suspected of something by the law, even though they may think he is innocent, they may ask to hold his coat until they prove his innocence. If the man trusts the law and is really innocent, he will not mind. Jesus said, if this happens, give the cloak also. If a person is not guilty, he has no reason to be afraid. Jesus instructed his followers that they should ask them for their coat, that if any man should ask them for their coat, they were to give their robe also. According to Bible customs, when you get rid of your coat and your robe, you are still not naked, although in the Bible it is called naked, as in Job 24:10. You still have your underclothes, but it is an indication of giving your all. For in the East, many times a man has no other possession than what he wears. Okay. Verse 43. Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor, and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them which curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. And, I'll keep reading. I think he says it here. That ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. We're following God's example, and God makes the sun to shine on the just, the good and the evil, the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. So many people have the attitude of, I'll treat others the way they treat me. So many people have that attitude of, I'll love the people that are nice to me, and people that aren't, I won't. And that's understandable, and I suppose, it is better than hating everybody. It's nice to love the people that are loving to you. It's nice that you're not the one that is being bad, mean, rude, whatever to other people. But Jesus Christ is here again introducing a higher plane to live on, a higher plane. That's a choice to make. Do you want to live like everybody else? The Bible often says, like the other Gentiles. Do you want to be like every other unbeliever, every other idiot out there? Because the world that they have made is not a really sweet place to live, is it? Yeah. The guy decides he's going to go through life just treating everybody the way that he's treated. So somebody's mean to him, and that's how he's going to be to that person. And then pretty soon you know what? Enough people are mean to him that he just becomes a mean guy. Because that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes. And that's how the world just gets worse and worse and worse. But when we live on a higher plane, then we can change that. We can be the one to interrupt that vicious cycle of life. And that's what it is. Just this vicious cycle. By deciding that, you know what? I'm not going to just give out the same junk, the same malarkey that everybody's handing to me. I'm going to choose to be different. I'm going to choose to be positive when other people are negative. I'm going to choose to be kind even though they're not. I'm not going to keep score on everything and just make sure that I give back what I get. When I got married, when Loretta and I got married, Loretta's mother told us to go through, as we were opening up the gift cards, and write down the name and next to it the amount that everybody gave us. So that when she went to their kid's wedding, she would do the same thing. You know, now that's kind of a funny example, but a lot of people mentally do that same kind of accounting. Well, this person, they did this, this, and this for me, so I will do this, this, and this for them. And this person, they didn't do anything for me, so I won't do anything for them. Okay, you can do that, but Jesus Christ asks us to live on a higher plane. He goes on to say, for if you love them that love you, what reward have you? Do not even the publicans the same? If you just love people that love you, then what reward do you have? Why should God reward them? Anybody can do that. Anybody can be nice to people that are nice to them. Anybody can be loving to somebody that loves them. And if you salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so? If you're only, happy and friendly to those that you know, well, what big deal is that? Be therefore perfect, even as your Father, which is in heaven, is perfect. That's who we're to be like. We're not to be like, okay, what would you like to aspire to in life? Would you like to be like Homer Simpson? Or would you like to be like God, your loving Father? Okay.
God.
Yeah, good choice. Good choice. Do you want to be like everybody else? Do you want to be like the worst, miserable, no good so-and-so that you run into? Or do you want to be like God? That's what Jesus Christ is putting before them. And that choice hasn't changed. That's still our choice. Let's look at chapter 6. Take heed that ye do not your alms before men to be seen of them. Alms means your acts of service, giving, love for God. The things that you would do for others because you love God. That should be done because you love God. Don't do your alms to be seen of men, otherwise you have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have the reward. Most days I take a 45-minute brisk walk through Hoops Park. And now, the thing is, everybody that is willing to donate a tree or donate something, they got to have their name on it. They got to have their name on it. All these philanthropists, they have their names on these buildings because they want to make sure that they get the recognition, that they get the credit for it. But if that's the motivation, to be seen of men, well, I hope you enjoy whatever measure of recognition you get because that's all you're getting. But when thou doest thine alms, verse 3, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly. If we're not doing it for men's approval, for men's recognition, for the praise of men, if we're not doing it to be seen of men, but instead doing it genuinely out of love for God and love for people, then God, who sees that act done in secret, will reward you openly. If you're just doing it for the praise of men, well, then you get that, if you get it. And even if you don't get it, if that was your motivation behind it, that's all you got. Verse 5. And when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. And it's not the answer to their prayers, it's that they're praying for people. They're not praying for God. They're not praying to God. They want to impress people. And boy, even some, Christians would do that, They just pray so eloquently and so impressive. And they're more concerned about how eloquent their prayer is than just praying. Prayer doesn't have to be fancy. And if that's somebody's concern, then they're in danger of crossing into this category. A prayer should be from the heart. A prayer should be from the heart, and it can be as simple as, someone named Uncle Harry used to pray, "Thank you, Father, for a healthy body and a sound mind." And that's how he prayed all the time. It was just that simple. But that was a genuine prayer. Verse 6. But when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. When you pray, then it should be between you and God. That's the point. You don't have to clear out your closet or shove the coats in the vacuum cleaner to the side and go in there every time you want to pray. That's not what the point is. The point is that prayer is something between you and God. Verse 7. But when ye pray, use not vain repetitions, as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. Be not ye therefore like unto them, for your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before ye ask of him. When you pray, it says not to use vain repetitions. And this has to be one of the most ironic verses in the entire Bible to me. Because what comes next? After this manner, therefore, pray ye, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. How many of you could do that without looking at your Bibles? And it's probably not because you decided at some point you would memorize that verse. But instead, amazingly, sadly, ironically, people have done with that prayer exactly what he said not to do, and that is to pray with vain repetitions, where you just keep praying the same prayer all the time. Just vain repetitions. And that by that, saying that prayer all the time, somehow that's going to cut some ice with God. And that's what people were taught. And I'm not criticizing people. The person that does that, most of the time done by sincere people, loving people who, want to do what's right, but that's what they've been taught. And like all of this stuff, we just have to go deeper in our understanding of what it really was given for and what the meaning behind it is. God bless you.